Catherine Wynne. Dr. Wynne is senior lecturer at the University of Hull. Her field of research is literary and visual culture of the 19th and 20th century, with a particular focus on representations of colony and empire, the Gothic, travel writing, and illustration. A few selected publications by Dr. Wynne, a monograph entitled Bram Stoker, Dracula and the Victorian Gothic Stage, and Bram Stoker and the Stage Reviews, Reminiscences, Essays, and Fiction. The title of Dr. Wynne's paper is Military Power and Resistance, Lady Butler's Visions of 19th Century Egypt and Ireland.
People I'm talking about today, it's a couple, it's a husband and wife, and they're not well known. He's not known at all, so don't worry if you've never heard of them, because few people have. She's more famous as a military artist, but she lost her reputation to some degree, or she became unknown in the 20th century, even though she was sensational in the 19th century in Lady Butler in the 1870s. And what I'm going to look at today is the representation of military and imperial power in the 19th century context, focusing on her husband's career and also focusing on her art and her illustrated travel writings. And I'm going to start with a quotation. I have no hesitation in saying that 5/6 of our African wars, and still a larger proportion of our Indian wars in America, have their beginnings in the wrongs done in the first instance by white men upon natives. To the incoming settler, the land of his adoption is essentially a new land. There may have been people in it for centuries before he came to it. Depending on where you're seeing this picture, if you're seeing it in London at the Royal Academy, you might see this picture as a patriotic picture. But there are other things going on in this picture, and this is the moment of resistance, I think, which is really, really interesting here. This recruit is marching jauntily towards war, but at the same time, he's got this expression on his face, which is almost hostile. And this figure here is looking back, and what you see here is a ruined cottage. Now, this is very much Butler telling us about the desolation and devastation of Ireland. This is a ruin which maybe harks back to the famine. And not only is he doing that, but he's looking back, and what you can see here there are a series of cottages in the background there, and there's smoke coming from under his chimneys. So he's looking back towards his family that he is leaving behind. Now, if we think about the period in which this painting was executed, the 1870s was a period of famine in the west of Ireland as well. It was also a period of time when the Irish were mobilising both constitutionally for a home rule, for their own government, but they were also mobilising more radically and more politically to get transfer of their land. There was a movement to get the transfer of land from landlord ownership to the ordinary tenant farmers, to the peasants. So that's what the painting is about as well. So we can read it in both ways, and that's very interesting about Butler's work. She's producing a painting that can be seen to be a patriotic piece, but she's also producing a painting which is making a very strong comment on Irish social conditions in the 19th century. Now, that's not the end of that painting, because what are these soldiers doing? These young men who have no money, who are forced maybe to take the Queen's shilling and go to war, they are doing what William Butler is saying they're doing at the beginning in that opening quotation. They are transplanting the seeds of injustice, you could argue, to other countries, because what will they be doing? They will be fighting in imperial wars. So it complicates the Irish relationship to empire in lots of ways. Very, very, very powerful if you see this painting in reality. The Connaught Rangers are actually, they're a military unit. They're from the west of Ireland. You don't necessarily have to be all from the west of Ireland, but it's just a military unit like you'd call 7th Division or whatever. So, very, very interesting painting to see in real life what she's doing.
Be it against the hegemony of the West or the misogyny of the East, or both, their stories offer new ways of viewing the world and representing the South as a contested ground where discourses of power and counter-power take shape. Palestinian women who left in 1948 wrote about the loss of their home and disintegration in their country. and the disintegration of their country. Their memoirs are rooted in the history and geography of the land, present in its absence. The void left by the disappearance of villages, communities, way of living is depicted in the light of the practicalities of daily life, looking for new homes, shelters, food, jobs, and countries where to settle. Nadia, captive of hope, my prison, Tita, mother and May, amongst others, penned by Palestinian women, and they portray the loss of Palestine and the repercussion of that on people's everyday life and psyche. The fact that the majority of those narratives are written in English or translated into English shows the urgency of speaking directly to the Anglophone world and inscribing their own historical truth. Memoirs are filled with long passages about refugee camps, the historical formation of the State of Israel, the involvement of their leaders, Israeli leaders, in acts of terror against the Palestinians and the British as well during the occupation. They read as instances for documenting their plight and their ongoing struggle for independence. This underscores the author's determination to survive as a collective group against erasure. Their experience and cultural differences challenge the genre of autobiography and its generic boundaries. Exiles, immigrants, colonized, neo-colonized subjects deploy, according to Barbara Harlow, autobiographical practices that go against the grain, and in so doing, the I they create becomes a place of creative and, by implication, political intervention.
The second part of this paper is entitled "The Sexual is Political." And I start here with this very famous quote from George Orwell's 1984. Their embrace had been a battle, the climax a victory, it was a blow struck against the party, it was a political act. Andre Brink's frank rendition of sexual scenes has often been misunderstood as an exaggerated textual libertinage. His novel, Before I Forget, for instance, appeared on the 2004 shortlist of the Bad Sex Award organized by the London magazine Literary Review. The aim of the reward, explains Jonathan Beckman, one of the judges and organizers of the prize, is, I quote, to draw attention to the crude, tasteless, often perfunctory use of redundant passages of sexual description in the modern novel and to discourage it, end of quote. Andre Brink, however, is far away from being discouraged or ashamed, for describing the intimate resides at the heart of his writings. I quote here from Andre Brink, I think that one's sexuality is such an important part of one's overall self that I cannot pretend it is not there. Equally importantly adds, I also hope that readers might be enticed into the book with certain expectations which I would then start to subvert. End of quote. His use of sex then can be viewed, this is how I view it anyway, as a strategic move to disrupt and transgress. In a 1996 interview, Andre Brink recounts an anecdote about his first literary production. I quote, I wrote my first novel at 12. Sent the first time to a publisher at 14. They turned it down as too erotic. I didn't know what the word meant. End of quote. His juvenilia, discarded on the basis of sexual explicitness, must have shaped his subsequent vision of the sexual as an act of dissidence. This is how the young Brink has evolved into a transgressive writer involved into two forbidden areas under the apartheid regime, namely sex and politics. He had to pay for affronting the state power as he was censored, harassed, and even branded as a traitor to the Puritan principles of Afrikanerism. The young boy who wrote an erotic book without being aware that he was violating social codes will grow into an adult who makes it a point to speak openly about sexuality as a way to affront and confront an oppressive regime or an oppressive system. In 1973, Brink's, I don't know how to pronounce this in Afrikaner, Kennis van die Aan, I think, translated later as Looking on Darkness, was the first novel by an Afrikaner to be censored. The book recounts, I quote very briefly here, the book was accused of pornography because a colored man and a white woman dared to make love and in fact enjoyed it.
If you have some additional information for any one of any specific speaker, you could discuss it with him or her, with her, once this session is done, because I'm accustomed to, I always ask my students to avoid sexist language, so it's like a reflex. Right, so you are invited to discuss it with her once this session is done. And please make your questions brief and concise.
Sexual healing.
We needed the photograph.
More serious. More serious. I said sexual, not pornography.
It's Friday.
More seriously, my question is to our first invited speaker, Dr. Avril. The attitude of backers in the case of Egypt and Ireland is puzzling to me. As you said in your paper, they are with or in and outside the colonial system by showing some sympathy towards the Irish and the Egyptians. And to me this is Jewish attitude. And this sympathy and probably this pity does not go as far as solidarity or resistance. I don't know. I want to tell me more about this. The other thing is that taking the attitude of the butlers from a character angle, when you compare the paintings and the writings on Egypt and Ireland, there is an Orientalist touch in Egypt, which is probably not certainly absent, but there is a different attitude towards the Irish. I want to know what you think about this. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of sense that Egypt in the 1880s wasn't just kind of Cairene street scenes. On these Cairene streets, you had a British military presence. And I think what I'm trying to do with her is sort of kind of look at the way the paintings and the illustrations can be seen really as sort of reporting that as well. That's not something that we can sort of dismiss, that it actually brings to attention, even though it's still rather conservative, but it actually brings to attention that Egypt was occupied, and that the power in Egypt was very much kind of a British military power in Egypt at that time. And I think if you go into her in more depth and think about what she's doing there, I mean, she also talks about the way in which when the Khedive passes through the streets of Cairo, that the Egyptians salute, but the British army officers stay in their seats because they know actually they're fundamentally the powerful ones there. So she is still very conservative, but I thought what was quite interesting about her was actually she's not presenting an image of Egypt like other Orientalist painters, which is, she is using that, she's using particularly the influence of John Frederick Lewis, the British Orientalist painter.
I'd like to ask a question to Dr. Idris, I think, yes. I thought that your paper includes more sex than eros. Your paper includes more sex than eros. Even in the terms of Rogenbauer, he talks about pleasure and jouissance, which are two different concepts. They overlap, but they can be different. Jouissance is more about poetry, maybe ravishment. It can include bed, etc. But this is not my main point. My main point is that you're using sexuality as a metaphor for subversion, political subversion. And you know this in the May Revolution of '68. This was tried and it failed, So even this strategy of using the sexual metaphor for political subversion is not so efficient in. You understand my point? It's a bit anachronistic to talk about sex and politics after May '68. This is my idea.
The apartheid regime played on this, changed the family life of blacks, their sexuality, everything in their life. And something else also in this Afrikaner society at that time, it was very conservative. People had no right to talk about anything, no sexuality, nothing. It was their way to preserve this pure society, pure in everything, in its whiteness and its ethics. So here comes Andre Brink, not alone, with a group of writers called, surprisingly enough, the Sestigers, who was very much influenced by the 1968 revolution in France. And Andre Brink studied in France. He was very much influenced by that. And then he decided to go back to South Africa to resist from the inside. But I don't know, I mean, sex and Eros, I mean, I'm using just terms here used by either Hollenberg or Andre Brink. I mean, I don't know, Eros here, one needs to go to Plato's, what's this famous, to go, yes, Platon, not the Republic. Le banquet, okay, le banquet and then things will be explained about Eros, the god of sexuality, desire, and things like that. But here I'm just using terms used by either Andre Brink or Hollenberg.
The West argue for a two-state solution that Arabs refuse.
No, there's talk. There's talk about two-state solution.
Okay, you said that we refuse that solution, that's right.
No, I said the feasibility of two-state solution, given the map I just was showing, is not possible, because otherwise we would be having like a domino table and putting bits and pieces of
okay. Well, my question is, don't you think that it's again, once more, as Edward Said points to, it is once more a Western strategy to give us the illusion that they're truly looking and genuinely looking for a proper solution? Because he speaks about that peace process, and he said that during that peace process, the reality on the ground has totally metamorphosed.
So it's not possible. Even W. Bush, when they showed him the map, he heard about talks about Israel and Palestine. He told them, so give me the map, I want to see it. He looked at it, George W. Bush, and he said there's no solution. So let them keep talking. So the possibility of a solution is impossible, and then she realizes it, but she does not want in her discourse to analyze her Western readers and to be seen like an extremist or radical. She wants to sell something, and this is, she thinks, is the first step to start the dialogue and start negotiating something. That's it, really. What for, I don't know. We need history to answer that question. Anyway, she answers what for. She answers with the end of Saladin battle after 100 years of wars and battles. He took the Quds back, so it's her answer anyway. I don't know.
From the perspective of women in literature. So it's very brief. The quotation with the character, I'm not sure about the beginning of the quotation, but where she says, thinking about those who still live there, and are interested in the there. She doesn't name it, does she? The place. Does she name the place? Does she say it's Palestine? Or I like the fact that she uses there here. So what's your comment about that?
It's a passage, part of the whole. Not really the institutions and those in power. They say something about the people, about the Labour Party. She speaks about the left in Britain, about the Labour Party, about the way they embrace the Palestinian cause at points, and they sympathized with peoples and with the, and condemned atrocities. She mentioned some Labour prime ministers and people in that. She's aware of that division, and she plays on that. Thank you. Thanks very much.
To this effect, the modalities used by NGOs in various case studies for the engineering of consent, quote, are exposed and their underlying mechanisms are revealed. So first, the theoretical underpinning Foucault's concept of power. The concept of power is deeply indebted to the work of Foucault. For Fraser, 1989, Foucault's most valuable accomplishment consists in a rich empirical account of the modern modalities of power, yielding important insights into the nature of modern power bearing political significance. Fraser synthesizes Foucault's main claims in the following. Modern power is productive rather than prohibitive, that is, ruling out the repressive hypothesis. It is capillary, it's bottom-up, as it operates from the lowest extremities of the social body in everyday social practices. It touches people's lives more fundamentally through their social practices than through their beliefs. It is anchored in the multiplicity of micro-practices, that is to say, the social practices that constitute everyday life in modern societies. It is a call for a politics of everyday life that concentrates on the actual ways in which power operates. Foucault endows this complex with an explicitly political character, hence the political coloring of the term power, as it involves forms of social constraint, valorization of some statement forms, and the concomitant devaluation of others, as well as institutional licensing of some persons as authorized to offer authoritative knowledge claims while excluding others. For Foucault, modern power replaces violence and force of arms with the gentler constraint of uninterrupted visibility. It keeps a low profile and is thus less easily targeted for the resistance, yet it is more efficacious. As a result of its more superior hold on details, it is more penetrating than earlier forms of power. I'm relying on Fraser's synthesis. It gets hold of its objects at the deepest level, in their gestures, habits, bodies, and desires. It's not situated in some central persons or institutions, such as king, ruling class, state, or army. Rather, it's everywhere, even in the targets themselves. Modern power is self-amplifying. It continually increases its own force in the course of its exercise, not by negating opposing forces, but rather by utilizing them as transfer points within its own circuitry.
Despite the complexity of the concept, scholars generally agree on the social nature of ideology. It is about social relations, consciousness, and power struggle, which play important parts in carrying out ideological objectives. With relation to language, ideology is understood in its role as first, a promoter of a language at the cost of another, and here comes the role of status planning, and second, a political and economic weapon in the service of the dominant class. Thus, ideology flows from the concept of power. Ideology and power are therefore interconnected and cannot be disentangled. The concept of ideology is very closely attached to Gramsci's definition of hegemony. In this regard, Gramsci distinguishes between coercion and consent as alternative mechanisms of social power. From a Gramscian perspective, hegemonic power is often implicit common sense rather than a coherent body of knowledge. Thus, just like ideology, hegemony is about providing choices that are presented as natural, inevitable, and beneficial to the social order. In the Miami context, coercing ethno-linguistic groups into using English in all public spheres of life is a purely ideological stance. Indeed, English-only proponents who endorse Rui's language as a problem orientation assert that officializing the de facto status of English helps linguistic minorities integrate into the whole society and prevent social change and chaos. Thus, imposing their language as an important power mechanism, established white Americans strove to maintain their power and, in the process, exclude the ethno-linguistic minorities from power sharing. Now, let's have a look at the historical background. The year 1980 was a landmark period in the history of Miami. It was a period when the city became the site of power contest between established white Americans and newly arriving Cubans. Most important is the fact that Miami became the site of language wars between both ethno-linguistic groups. Yet, in order to have a better understanding of the situation, it is instructive to go back 2 decades earlier before I proceed. After Castro's takeover in January 1st, 1959, a large number of Cubans came to the U.S. in successive waves.
Now, given this apparent power of constraints, it was necessary for phonological theory to incorporate them in generalizations. This is what Carol Paradis in 1988 tried to do with her theory of constraints and repair strategies that attempted to include constraints into rule-based phonology by means of building a theory that includes constraints of the type against 3 consonantal clusters, repair operations of the type insert, delete, or change, and rules that act relatively independently, such as the apocryphy rule in Yahia. In this theory, constraints are considered as inviolable, and they may or may not be universal, but they could be universal or language-specific. Now, incorporating constraints into rule-based phonology exhibited various challenges. For example, the theory of constraints and repair strategies is forced to make the arbitrary distinction between rules and repairs. Apocryphy, for example, could be a rule if it is systematically applied in the language, or also it could be interpreted as a repair operation if it is motivated by a constraint. Now, by the end of the, let's say, the late 1980s, the early 1990s, it was very apparent that constraints needed a theory of their own, and this is what Prince and Smolensky in their 1993 work did with the construction of a grammar, or a theory of grammar that is built entirely out of constraints, where the burden of phonological generalizations is entirely shifted from rules to constraints. The theory holds that at the heart of grammar there are constraints rather than rules, and constraints are mainly of 2 types: markedness, which are constraints that militate for the well-formedness of outputs, and faithfulness constraints, which care for the harmony between inputs and outputs. It also holds that constraints are in conflict, they are universal, and they are violable. The conflict between constraints is resolved by ranking the constraints in a strict dominance hierarchy, so that satisfaction of a high-ranked constraint is decisive in the surfacing of an optimal output. It is also claimed in the theory that cross-linguistic differences, and actually even cross-dialectal differences, are instances of different rankings of the same universal constraints. The theory is schematized in Kagger in 1999 as follows. To the left, you can see the input that is submitted to gen, a function generator, that generates a possibly infinite number of candidate analyses, like candidate A, B, C, and so on. These candidates are evaluated by the function evaluator against a set of ranked constraints, constraint 1, constraint 2, until only one output form surfaces, which is called the optimal output.
I was going to talk just about elite power and about corporate and transnational governance, but since we're in Tunis and since I've been doing work on this, I thought I would also talk about the Zionist movement in the UK, and I brought some copies of a report we did just last year on the British Israel Communications and Research Centre, which is available on our website, spinwatch.org, to download. There's about 3 copies here for the fastest person up at the end. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Zionist movement in the UK, and it's linked into corporate elite networks across the Western world and other places too. So we're going to come to that after I've talked a little bit first about reinventing elite power. Now, if we want to talk about reinventing elite power, we need to go back to one of the earliest and best accounts of elite power by C.R. Mills, the famously trendy sociologist who rode around on motorbikes. That's the most famous photograph of him there, with his leather jacket, and died at this astonishingly early age of 46. And he talked about the power elite. He diagnosed the problem of the US power elite as being one of three interlocking directorates of power: political, economic, and military. And then you see an excerpt from the book of men whose positions enable them to transcend the ordinary environments of ordinary men and women. They are in positions to make decisions having major consequences. They are in command of major hierarchies and organizations of modern society. They rule the big corporations, they run the machinery of the state, claim its prerogatives, and they direct the military establishment. They occupy strategic command posts. That's a classic of sociology. I guess it's known a little bit outside sociology. And its influence of this book has waxed and waned in sociology. If you look at the citations of it through the years, the citations were good in the late 60s and early 70s with the rise of radical sociology, even, dare we say it, from memory, insurgent sociology, as it was called in the journal edited from Berkeley, the hotbed of the US campuses in the late 60s. And it went out of favour in the 70s and 80s, and it has now come back into favour in sociology. So people are now talking again about power and elite power, particularly in an age where great power is able to, what should we say, make rather a mess of the world, and people are unable to understand why it can't be held to account. Although, of course, there are people across the world, including North Africa, who are trying to hold power to account in our ongoing process. So I want to start off then with the latest data we have on the economic sector of the power elite. This is a report from systems analysts at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. I'm not usually...
I'll try to compress my presentation, in fact, for the reasons you know. I've been with a short video.
Les années d'affrontement entre catholiques et protestants appartiennent désormais au passé, mais les traces de cette époque sont encore bien présentes sur le mur de la capitale de l'Europe du Nord. Certains historiens se sont même spécialisés dans ce nouveau genre de tourisme.
Salut, comment ça va? Dis-moi, tu pourrais m'emmener dans les quartiers du Nord et ouest de la ville voir les changements?
State power and state authority or state monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force is not the question. The question, in fact, is those dimensions, or in more subtle terms, the coercive dimensions of state power in a given society. What seems really the question is the coercive structures or elements of state power, or in other words, its internal security system. I'm just referring to the security system in every state, country. Unresolved as it looks, and under so far, this conflict in Northern Ireland. Of course, I'm skipping some parts of my talk. This conflict and others on the same dynamics seem posing endless questions on their nature and evolution and the way conflict management and/or resolutions were conceived. Not a Catholic myself, not a Protestant, not even a British, not an Irish citizen as well. I have been struck by the intensity and the durability, especially of the conflict from long ago so far, which I am mostly trying to examine from a Weberian perspective, along with John Burton's conflict resolution theory, CRT, as well as Ronald Weitzer's settler rule conception. The key issue here seems probably underestimated, that Northern Ireland was a historical site of colonial settlement, where the settler Presbyterians, even though by the time had become native to their own land, in Northern Ireland, they remained hostile and on other vis-a-vis the native indigenous inhabitants of Ireland, the Irish themselves. The key issue that seems one might admit that the conflict in Northern Ireland is solved as tensions became less frequent nowadays. However, one would also not be happy to read, hear, and listen to incidents that happened from time to time, especially last year in December and January 2013, in fact. So the conflict is still there, ongoing. In fact, this means John Burton's conflict resolution theory, CRT, as conflict avoidance, I quote, is not conflict resolution. Referring by conflict avoidance, I'm referring here to the Partition 1921, Signed Date Agreement 1973, the Bangladesh Agreement 1985, and the 1998 Good Friday Agreement. These different successive consensus politics, if I would say, or initiatives or solutions brought to the problem, but the problem is still there. Tensions are still between Catholics and Protestants, in fact.
In 1921, the establishment of Northern Ireland allowed the sectarian monopoly of power by the Unionist Protestant majority, and this monopoly of power by the Protestant majority led to violent confrontation in '69 because the nationalist Catholic minority felt frustrated. If you look at the peace process which led to the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, this peace process established a new kind of system which is called consociation. And this consociation, the point of this consociational model was to replace or to end the sectarian monopoly of power which had existed before. So my question will be quite simple. Has the new consociational institutions in Northern Ireland, have they managed to break really with sectarianism and to establish a balanced constitutional system of powers and counter-powers? It's a very simple question. In order to answer that question, I will try to explain what consociation is, what consociational democracy is. And in the second part, I will debate sectarianism, powers and counter-powers, the value of consociation in Northern Ireland. So what is consociation? I will try to give a sort of brief definition. Basically, consociation is a form of democracy which seeks to regulate the sharing of power in a divided state or in a divided society. Divisions can be ethnic, religious, political, whatever. This model of democracy was theorized in the 60s and 70s, mostly by a famous Dutch political scientist, Aaron Lichpaert. And the idea of consociation is to give those divided groups, those communities which are in conflict, to give them collective rights. That's the main principle. As such, consociation stands in stark contrast to majoritarian democracy. Because in majoritarian democracy, you integrate minorities not by giving collective rights, but by giving individual rights. That's the traditional majoritarian democracy. So as such, consociation is a major departure from the ideal of majoritarian democracy. Now the characteristics of consociation, basically there are four conditions to make sure that a real consociational system exists. The first system is, the first condition is an executive power sharing, which is a sort of coalition of leaders, each leader representing one of the groups which is in conflict with another group. So it's a power sharing of the elites of the leaders of each group. And the typical model is a multi-party executive cabinet. That's a typical situation. The second condition is the principle of mutual veto, which means that each group must have the capacity to veto any decision which it considers made by the government, which it considers as threatening to them. That's the second condition.
It is important to have this comparison between Hobbes and Tocqueville. This superiority of the theory of Hobbes in this particular moment, revolution and post-revolutionary period, leads us to understand this idea I mentioned in my introduction about power being a counter-power. Power is a counter-power against perils like violence and instability. These perils may be individual, but they may also be collective. I give you one example, terrorist groups. It may be hard to believe, but if you look at the organization of a terrorist group, you would find many of the voluntary interaction between individuals. And it is not just this feature, but there are many features that can lead to compare terrorist groups to social networks, civil society. It is usually understandable to speak about legitimacy of a revolution, but I think this legitimacy is nonsense. I think revolution is about legitimization. A revolution has to win to be legitimate, and this is very dangerous to say, because I've just mentioned that it is because their action outside and against the law that a terrorist group is uncivil. So here we are drawing very close to a comparison between revolution and terrorism. That's why revolutionaries usually insist upon the civility of their action. The authoritarian regime usually accuses the revolution of incivility, to put revolution on the same footing as terrorist groups. So this accusation gives it the possibility to fight them fiercely and legitimately.
And you opened our eyes to the importance of lobbying, and you showed us how strong the pro-Israeli lobby is in the United Kingdom. My question is, it seems to me that what you showed us, the information that you gave us, does not reach pro-Palestinian lobbies, because there are pro-Palestinian lobbies. When we listen to them, when we hear them defending the Palestinian cause on television and their writings, to me, they are into this outdated, inflated rhetoric, which is not grounded in reality, which does not use information, such information, data, examples of data that you showed us. My question again is, what should we make, or what should we make to help the pro-Palestinian, the other camp, the pro-Palestinian lobbies, change the rhetoric and use grounded information to gain support to the Palestinian cause? Thank you.
The boycott, divestment, sanctions movement is almost at the point of starting to spread sufficiently far to make a difference. The Israeli government has repeatedly said, in public, in the press, and other places, in sources that you can read if you've got an internet connection, that it is very worried about BDS. Just yesterday, I noticed a university in Scotland in Dundee passed a BDS motion against Israel. That is the hope for movement, it seems to me, as well as the...
To what extent can we talk about what happened in Egypt as a society after President Morsi was ousted by a military coup? Thank you.
I need 20 minutes. No, because the particular case of Egypt must be compared to the particular case of Tunisia, and I think the problem with Egypt that the desire for the dictatorial regime was triggered because of the untidy competition and the unorganized competition in the media, around power. All the institutions were victims of competition between different groups, and each group was afraid of the other. So there was a coalition against the Muslim Brotherhood. Don't forget that some members of this coalition were Salafists, which may be explained, but not here, because it is a subject by itself. So when you cannot, you end up with a situation in which there is no possibility of organizing competition, organizing political debate, organizing the relationships between intermediary bodies. Intermediary bodies is a general term that covers political parties, labor union, associations, even mass media.
Nothing we can say about the character that the character does not know about himself. This is the primary condition of biologism in Dostoevsky for Martin. So, I said this is actually what makes him this. So this self-knowledge is actually what makes Grimus worthy of, what makes Flapping Eagle worthy of being the one who meets Grimus. In addition to Flapping Eagle, Grimus, the supreme being of the island, is also represented as the character who has gone furthest in his knowledge of himself, of his own weaknesses and his inhibitions. This is why he is the supreme manifestation of power or of romantic detachment. Yet, strangely enough, it is when it comes to the description of Grimus's and Flapping Eagle's inner monsters that the narrative remains silent. We are made to believe throughout the novel that the feeling of humiliation We are made to believe throughout the novel that the feeling of humiliation that knows that the character's heart is of a sexual nature. The examples are always concrete and straightforward. We have to bear this in mind. The examples are always concrete and straightforward. The humiliation, the nature of humiliation is always concrete. For example, a minor character, a vulgar man called Flano Tool, likes to harass all women, deriving much pleasure from abusing them with a variety of phallic expressions, and likes to tell others that he divorced his wife because she was ugly, when the truth is that she divorced him for sexual dissatisfaction, his penis being no longer than an inch. This example is one among many that show how accurately the narrator describes the inhibitions of the inhabitants of K, which inhibitions urge them to find refuge in what they make others think of them. However, when it comes to Flapping Eagle and Grimus, no clear description of their inhibitions is provided. For Flapping Eagle, we are vaguely made to know that the inhibition is of sexual nature. For Grimus, the case becomes even more obscure. At the end of the novel, Grimus succeeds in making Flapping Eagle penetrate his mind, the latter thus acquiring the capacity to be both himself and his alter ego at the same time.
The second category is the one of the modern servants with the upstart and commercial frame of mind. These aim at subverting the feudal system from within by acting like parasites with their lords, and, as Iago explains with relish, do well thrive by them, and when they have lined their coats, when they have made money, do themselves homage. This is a sarcastic parody of the act of homage, which in the feudal convention is performed by a vassal to the lord, and he is a vassal doing the act of homage to himself. Iago proudly declares that he belongs to this second category. Such fellows have some soul, and such a one do I profess myself. While Kent gives his soul freely to his lord, ready even to die for him, Iago makes it a saleable, hence profitable property. It is only to gratify his personal interests of upward mobility in the military hierarchy that he promises Othello, his general, total devotion. I am your own forever. If he derides the typically feudal servant, whom he calls the duteous and knee-crooking knave, he does not mind kneeling, literally, and take a solemn oath before his master in a way that parodies rights of knighthood. Witness that Iago does give up the execution of his wicked hand's heart to wronged Othello's service. Iago fashions his identity according to his own ambitions and submits himself to vassalage only to rise to power by getting promoted to the rank of lieutenant. As to Kant, who sees that freedom lives hence when he is banished, he promises to refashion himself while remaining faithful to his customary conduct. Thus Kant bids you all adieu, he'll shape his old course in a country new. To shape an old course sounds almost oxymoronic regarding the load that the verb acquired in the humanist tradition of self-fashioning. Indeed, in the oration of the dignity on the dignity of man, considered as the manifesto of the Renaissance, man is extolled for his faculties to transform himself in whatever form he pleases, and is praised as, quote, a shape-shifter. Here, Kant's old course is the one already shaped after codes of feudalism and leaves no room for another possible shaping. Indeed, he shortly embraces his position as a déclassé and reshapes only his physical appearance by donning an outfit and adopting an accent, certainly a rustic brogue, that best fit a servant. Unable to shake off the yoke of servitude, he presents himself unto the one who has banished him, expressing his wish to serve him truly that will put me in trust.
The next speaker is Avril teaching assistant at the University of Higher Institute of Languages of Tunis. He's teaching field drama, mythology, and action plans. His paper is entitled Gender, Sexuality, and Empowerment in Tuni, Questioners, Answers, and Earth.
She suggests a discourse that aims at blurring sexual boundaries as well as old binary oppositions such as heterosexual, homosexual, men, women. This paper sheds significant light on how Kushner seeks to empower the gay community in the 1980s during the period led by President Ronald Reagan. First of all, by empowering the effeminate gay and disempowering the masculine closeted gay, staging explicit gay sex, and adopting Brechtian tenets. So, I would like to present a general overview of the play. Tony Kushner's Entries in America, a gay fantasia on national themes, follows the lives of 5 gay men, 2 of whom are infected with AIDS. The play portrays the social, political, and emotional effects of AIDS on gay men, amidst the oppression imposed by heterosexual hegemony in the mid-1980s. It deconstructs traditional gender dichotomies and ultimately empowers gay men as a result of this deconstruction. In the play, gay men are not simply marginalized figures, they establish identities that disempower the heterosexual hegemony and those who propagate it. The theoretical framework originates deeply inclined from the theory upheld by Joseph Butler, which is gender performativity. So the prominent queer theorist Joseph Butler claims that sexuality is always constructed within the terms of discourse and power, where power is partially understood in terms of heterosexual and cultural conventions. Butler contends that gender is a construction shaped by social and cultural conventions. She acknowledges that different gender roles are performed and indicating that they are in fact just roles acted out. So Judith Butler here disrupts, like the dichotomy between sex and gender. Defining the key characteristics of fabulous theater, Kushner defines fabulous theater as a theater that deals actively with homosexual themes. Fabulous plays do not and cannot exist prior to the AIDS crisis. Fabulous theater is theatrical, realism is not abundant entirely. And fabulous theater is written not exclusively for homosexual audiences, it is also meant for straight audiences. Fabulous theater also treats homosexuality within an investiture of power and a strength-in and simultaneous demand for political capacity. It seeks to empower the gay community, politically speaking. So, empowering the effeminate and gay. In this play, Kushner stereotypes the different gay men in the play through gender performativity, deviating from traditional, culturally imposed equations of masculinity and power by associating feminine performatives with power. Some of the gay characters manifest these feminine performatives in the various speech acts, gestures, and staging elements, both written in the text as well as contributed by the actors and director. Thus, Kushner bestows power to the effeminate gay characters who resist heteronormativity, thereby disempowering the masculine gay characters.
And actually, it's very insightful in Rushdie because we can learn what Rushdie thinks about his mother from his representation of that mother, of the doll. But it's not necessary.
So one doesn't preclude the other. We just have different levels of literary.
I just said that actually the presence of the doubles, of explicit doubles, misleads.
Sexuals is there going to be the division or not? I said, since Kent is dying, going to die, there's going to be no division. It's going to be convert. The students proposed another idea, and they said it's going to be a division between Albany and Edinburgh. So what do you think of that? Thank you.
Himself, maybe that he's not going to live so long as we that are young are not going to live like those old ones who Lear's pain that has been stretched, and this is why he wants to see Lear die finally. Yeah? And this is why he says that maybe we, the young ones, that is, it seems that the crown befalls him more than he doesn't expect himself to rule, and well, he has to accept the crown anyway. Edgar, the young man. Well, I think it's Edgar who has the crown at the end of King Lear. Well, I've never thought of the Earl of Albany being a possible. I've never thought of this.